Imagine drifting down a river so silent that even the water seems to hold its breath. The low mist covers everything like a veil, and for a moment you feel it. You're not alone. Something is watching you. Something massive, ancient, and patient. Riverfolk say that when the current shifts for no reason, when the canoes start rocking without wind, or when a whirlpool appears out of nowhere, it's because she woke up. A creature as black as a moonless night, with glowing eyes that cut through the darkness, eyes that tell you shouldn't be there. Some say she's as big as a boat. Others swear she stretches for dozens of meters, sliding beneath the surface like the river's own shadow. But the worst part isn't what she does. It's when she shows herself, because the people who saw her weren't looking for anything, and they all describe the same thing: a pressure in the air, like the whole river is holding its breath, waiting for the Boiúna, the great serpent, to rise. And when she chooses to rise, there's no escape. So let me ask you, if a legend is told by hundreds of different people in different regions, all describing the same creature, is it really just a legend? The Amazon is a place where the visible and invisible live side by side, where every tree, every river, every bend in a narrow waterway hides an ancient secret, older than any map, older than any written record. Long before colonizers arrived, indigenous peoples told stories about forest spirits, entities that protected or punished those who dared to disrespect the forces of the wild. And among all these beings, one has always stood out for inspiring both respect and fear: Boiúna, also known as the Great Snake. The legend of Boiúna stretches across centuries and appears in many indigenous cultures, like the Tupi, Tucano, and Nyangatu. Each group tells it their own way, but they all agree on one thing: Boiúna, isn't just an enormous animal. She is a spiritual entity that lives in the depths of the rivers. She doesn't belong to the human world, but she influences the lives of everyone who depends on the water. For some, she's the guardian of the river paths. For others, she is a living warning that the water has an owner, and it doesn't tolerate disrespect. Over time, the stories multiplied. Explorers, fishermen, even missionaries began reporting encounters with something in the water, something that didn't fit any logical explanation. In the rich and symbolic imagination of the Amazon, that something became one of the most feared and respected entities. Even today, in some riverside communities, there are unwritten rules where you can travel at night, which stretches of river you should avoid, and even words you shouldn't say, just to avoid drawing her attention. But why did this legend become so powerful? Why, among so many creatures in Brazilian folklore, does Boiúna remain one of the most talked about, feared, and respected? Maybe because deep down, she represents something humanity has feared since the beginning of time: the unknown hiding just beneath the surface. Telling the legend of the Boiúna is like traveling down a dark river in the middle of the night. You know something is there, but you can't quite see it. The stories almost always start the same way. Someone decides to cross the river at a forbidden hour. either because they have no choice or because they're simply too bold. And then the signs begin. The water starts moving differently. The surface gets too smooth, or a silence settles in so deep that even the insects stop singing. Riverfolk say those are her first warnings. According to the legend, Boiúna is much more than a giant snake. She can change shape, becoming a boat, a drifting log, or even a seductive woman rising from the water to lure careless travelers. Some stories describe a bluish light floating above the river, like a pair of distant glowing eyes, a strange phenomenon some call will-o'-the-wisp. But the elders insist it's just another form of the creature. One of the oldest tales tells of a group of fishermen who camped on the edge of an isolated tributary. In the middle of the night, the water began bubbling as if it were boiling. They thought it was some kind of hidden current, until a massive shadow slid beneath their canoe. Whatever it was so big that the canoe actually lifted a few inches, as if riding on the back of something alive. When the shadow passed, the river went completely still, unnaturally still, as though controlled by a greater force. Another well-known story is about a young man named Aru. From a riverside community in Pera, he decided to cross the river at night to visit his girlfriend. His family begged him to wait until sunrise. It was a new moon night, when Boiúna is said to swim closer to the surface. Aru didn't believe in legends, not until he noticed the river seemed wider than usual. As he rowed, he realized the reflection of the stars had vanished around his canoe. Something was blocking the light, something huge. Moments later, the boat flipped without warning. Aru resurfaced screaming, convinced he'd hit a floating log. But when he tried to climb back into the canoe, he felt the water moving with an unnatural force, as if it had a will of its own. He swam for his life, and says he only survived because he heard the village shaman calling his name from the shore. Apparently, the Boiúna didn't dare approach the old Padgy. Some accounts are even darker. Stories of entire boats dragged down by sudden whirlpools, waters turning black and thick like oil, until the creature reveals itself for a heartbeat to glowing eyes, far too large to belong to any animal we know. In many versions, she can summon storms, shift the tide, and even drown whole towns when enraged. What's most intriguing is that these stories appear in different regions, in different eras, told by people who never met each other, and yet they all describe the same being, massive, silent, and aware, a force that can't be hunted, can't be seen clearly, and above all, can't be defied. This is where the legend stops being just folklore and starts slipping into that gray area between myth and reality. Because unlike other stories that fade into the past, the Boiúna is still seen, or at least something very much like her. Recent reports from experienced fishermen describe encounters that defy any logical explanation. One of them, recorded in the 1990s, tells of a boat traveling along the Rio Negro when the water began spinning slowly, as if a whirlpool were forming right beneath the bow. The pilot tried to speed up, but the engine simply died, as if it had been smothered. Two men swear that for a few seconds they saw a dark mass rising ahead of them, far too big to be a manatee, a dolphin, or any known animal in the region. The thing sank again quickly, leaving a trail of waves that rocked the entire boat. Another case involved researchers installing sensors on the riverbed. One of them reported that something yanked the cable with such force that it almost dragged the whole team into the water. They only found the device days later, crushed, as though something massive had rolled right over it. They tried coming up with technical explanations, but none of the experts could identify an animal capable of that level of force. There are also reports of mysterious lights floating over Amazonian rivers, forming luminous circles in the water, exactly like the ancient shamans described the eyes of the Boiúna. Scientists try to explain it with gases, reflections, bioluminescence, but for the people who actually live there, that's just a modern excuse to avoid the truth. The waters have their guardians, and maybe the most unsettling detail is the pattern. The sightings usually happen on new moon nights, when the darkness is absolute. Reports are always accompanied by sudden changes in the river, currents appearing out of nowhere, stretches of water becoming eerily silent, engines failing for no reason. Coincidence? Natural phenomena? Or signs that something truly colossal is moving beneath the surface? The doubt remains, and for many, that doubt is worse than the answer itself. The story of the Boiúna reminds us of something essential. No matter how much humanity tries to dominate rivers, forests, and mountains, there are forces that remain beyond our control. The Amazon is one of those places where logic falters, where nature feels too alive, too aware. And at the heart of that territory, the Boiúna is still a powerful symbol, not just of fear, but of respect. Maybe she represents the very essence of the rivers, deep, unpredictable, and capable of hiding secrets that will never be revealed. Maybe she is a metaphor created by ancient peoples to remind us that humans must walk with humility. Or maybe an enormous creature really is sliding through the dark waters, surfacing only when someone dares to provoke what they don't understand. Regardless of the explanation, one thing is certain: the stories don't disappear. If anything, they keep surfacing, as if the forest insists on reminding us that the unknown is still out there, watching, waiting, breathing just below the surface. And even if much of science dismisses the idea of a giant entity in the Amazonian rivers, the people who live there tell a different story. They speak with conviction, with fear, with respect. They believe. And sometimes believing is what keeps you alive. After all, how sure can we really be about what exists in the depths of a place where the ground itself shifts, where rivers swallow towns, and where night falls so fast it feels alive? How confident can we be that everything can be explained? In the end, the Boiúna remains a silent reminder that the world is bigger than we imagined, that there are still untouched mysteries, shadows that move before we can see them, and giants we may never have the courage to face. And if you enjoyed this journey through Brazilian folklore, don't forget, like the video, Share it with someone who loves mysteries. And of course, subscribe to Urban Secrets so you don't miss any dark stories like this one. There are plenty of legends, creatures, and secrets waiting for you in the forests, in the rivers, and maybe much closer than you think.